The stars had never looked so hostile. Captain Zara Phoenix gripped the controls of her exploration vessel as warning alarms screamed through the cockpit. Red lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, while her ship, the Wanderer, plummeted toward the surface of an uncharted planet. "Come on, baby, stay with me," she whispered to her ship, fighting against the gravitational pull that seemed far stronger than any planet this size should possess. The atmospheric readings were off the charts, showing energy signatures unlike anything in the databases. The crash came hard and sudden. Metal groaned and twisted as the Wanderer carved a deep furrow through crystalline sand that sparkled like crushed diamonds. Zara's head struck the console, and darkness claimed her consciousness. When she awoke, gentle hands were touching her forehead. The pain in her skull had subsided to a dull ache, replaced by a strange tingling sensation wherever those fingers made contact. She opened her eyes slowly and found herself staring into the most beautiful face she had ever seen. The being leaning over her was tall and lean, with skin that seemed to be made of liquid silver. His features were sharp and angular, yet somehow perfectly proportioned. Most striking were his eyes, a deep violet color that seemed to swirl with inner light. Long, white hair fell around his shoulders like moonlight. "Do not be afraid," he said, his voice carrying a musical quality that made her heart skip. "I am Kale Vorthok. You crashed near our settlement." Zara tried to sit up, wincing as her ribs protested. "My ship. Is it beyond repair, I fear," Kale said softly. His hands remained on her shoulders, steadying her. "But you are alive, and that is what matters. My people do not often encounter visitors from the stars." She looked around and realized she was no longer in her cockpit. Instead, she lay on a bed made of some sort of crystalline material that glowed with soft, warm light. The room around them was unlike anything she had ever seen, with walls that seemed to be grown rather than built, curving organically and pulsing with gentle bioluminescence. "Where am I?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to break the spell of his touch. "This is Zarian, though I suspect that is not what your people would call it," Kale replied. "And you are in my home, where you will be safe while you heal." As he spoke, Zara noticed the way his eyes kept darting to a sealed doorway across the room. There was something troubled in his expression, a weight that seemed to burden him. When she followed his gaze, she could swear she heard a faint sound from beyond that door, like water flowing over stone. "What's behind there?" she asked. Kale's jaw tightened, and he moved away from her slightly. "Nothing that concerns you, Star Traveler. You must focus on recovering your strength." But Zara had not become a deep space explorer by ignoring her curiosity. "Please call me Zara, and I can hear something. Like a river." The alien man, Kale, stood abruptly and began pacing the room. His movements were fluid and graceful like a dancer. "You have sharp senses for one of your kind. What you hear flows beneath all of Zarian. We call it the Crimson Current." Crimson Current. Kale stopped pacing and turned to face her. In his violet eyes, she saw a mixture of longing and fear that made her chest tighten. "It is beautiful and terrible, Zara Phoenix. It offers everything one could desire, but at a price that cannot be undone." He moved closer again, and she caught his scent, like ozone in starlight. "Promise me something," he said, reaching out to touch her face with trembling fingers. "Promise me that no matter what you see or hear during your time here, you will not seek out the Crimson Current. You will not drink from it." The intensity in his voice, the way his touch seemed to burn against her skin, made her breath catch. There was something happening between them, something that transcended species and logic. She could feel it in the air, electric and undeniable. "I promise," she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Kale's relief was visible, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Good, because if you drink from the Crimson Current, you will never be the same again. And I, ... double quotes." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I find I care very much about preserving who you are, Zara Phoenix." The way he said her name sent shivers down her spine. She reached up and covered his hand with hers, marveling at how perfectly they seemed to fit together despite their obvious differences. "Tell me about your people," she said softly, as Kal began to speak of the Vorthani. His voice filled with both love and sorrow. Zara realized that her crash landing on Zarion might not have been an accident at all. The planet seemed to pulse around them with an ancient heartbeat. And somewhere far below, the crimson current flowed on, waiting. 3 days passed in Kale's crystalline sanctuary, and Zara found herself growing stronger with each sunrise. The twin suns of Zarion cast dancing shadows through the translucent walls, creating patterns that seemed to respond to her presence. More importantly, she found herself growing closer to her mysterious savior. Kale was unlike anyone she'd ever met. He possessed knowledge that spanned centuries. Yet there was an innocence in the way he marveled at her descriptions of Earth and human space travel. When he laughed at her stories, the sound was like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. "Your people sound wonderfully chaotic," he said one evening, as they shared a meal of exotic fruits that glowed with their own inner light. "We Vorthani have always been more ordered in our existence." "Ordered sounds peaceful," Zara replied, though she noticed the shadow that crossed his features whenever he mentioned his people. "Where are they?" "I haven't seen anyone else since I arrived." Kale's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully and looked toward the sealed doorway that continued to fascinate. "Zara, they are below," he said quietly. "In the deep chambers where the crimson current runs strongest. Are they hiding from something?" The question hung in the air between them. Kale rose and moved to the curved window that looked out over the crystalline landscape. In the distance, Zara could see structures that might have once been a great city. Now dark and abandoned. "Not hiding," Kale said finally. "Dying." The word hit Zara like a physical blow. She stood and moved to his side, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his silver skin. "What do you mean?" Kale closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they shimmered with unshed tears. "Long ago, my ancestors made a choice. They sought to transcend their mortal limitations, to become beings of pure energy and thought. They found a way through the crimson current that flows beneath our world." He turned to face her, and Zara felt her heart breaking at the pain in his expression. But the transformation was incomplete. Each generation since has been born weaker, more dependent on the current's power. Now my people cannot survive without regular exposure to its influence. Yet each exposure drains more of their life force. "How long do they have?" Zara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Months, perhaps weeks for the youngest." Kale's voice broke slightly. "I am the last of my kind who can still exist away from the current for extended periods. I serve as guardian and caretaker, but I can do nothing to save them." Without thinking, Zara reached for his hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, she felt a jolt of electricity that seemed to pulse from her heart to his. Kale gasped softly, his violet eyes widening. "What was that?" she whispered. "I do not know," he admitted, but he didn't let go of her hand. "Since you arrived, I have felt different, stronger, as if your presence awakened something within me that I thought was lost." They stood there in the fading light, hands clasped, eyes locked. The attraction between them had been building for days, but now it crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. Kale raised his free hand to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Zara," he breathed. And she could hear centuries of loneliness in that single word. Before either of them could second-guess the moment, their lips met. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Zara leaned into him, and Kale's arms came around her. And the kiss deepened with desperate hunger. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Zara could feel her heart pounding against her ribs, and she knew that whatever was happening between them had moved far beyond simple attraction. "This is impossible," Kale whispered, resting his forehead against hers. "Maybe," Zara replied, "but I don't care." Their second kiss was interrupted by a sound that made Kale stiffen in her arms. Footsteps, slow and measured, approaching from the corridor beyond the main chamber. He pulled away from her, his expression suddenly guarded. "Hide," he whispered urgently. "Behind the alcove? Do not let yourself be seen." Before Zara could protest, The sealed doorway dissolved, revealing a figure that took her breath away. The being that entered was clearly Vorthani, but where Kale's skin was silver, this one's was nearly white, almost translucent. Their features were sharper, more angular, and their violet eyes held an intensity that made Zara want to step back. "Elder Nyx," Kale said, bowing formally. "You should not have come so far from the current. Your strength, My strength is adequate for this conversation," the elder replied, their voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I felt a disturbance in the energy patterns of your dwelling. There is an alien presence here." From her hiding place, Zara watched Kale's jaw clench. "I found a crashed traveler. I have been tending to their injuries." "A human," Elder Nyx said, and it wasn't a question. "I can smell their primitive biology from here." They moved closer to Kale, and Zara saw her protector flinch slightly. "You know our laws about contact with outsiders. The laws were made to protect us from discovery," Kale replied carefully. "This human ship is destroyed." "They pose no threat. They pose the greatest threat of all," Elder Nyx snapped. "Hope. I can see it in your eyes, young guardian. You think perhaps this creature might somehow offer salvation for our people." Kale said nothing, but Zara could see the truth in his posture. Elder Nyx circled him slowly like a predator. "There is no salvation, Kale. We are the last of our kind, and we will die with dignity. The human must be eliminated before they can contaminate your thoughts further." "No." The word came out sharp and final. Kale straightened to his full height, meeting the elder's gaze. "I will not allow harm to come to Zara." The use of her name clearly surprised Elder Nyx. "Zara. You have named it?" "She is not an it," Kale said firmly. "She is a person, with thoughts and feelings and dreams. And she is under my protection." Elder Nyx studied him for a long moment, then smiled coldly. "I see. The human has already begun to corrupt you. Very well, guardian. Keep your pet, if you must. But know that when the Crimson Current calls to them, as it calls to all living things on Zarian, you will not be strong enough to save them from themselves." With that ominous warning, the elder turned and left as suddenly as they had arrived. Kale waited until the doorway sealed again before slumping against the wall. "Zara," he called softly, and she emerged from hiding. She went to him immediately, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Who was that?" "The leader of what remains of my people," Kale replied, holding her close. "And they are right about one thing. The longer you stay here, the more the Crimson Current will call to you. It calls to all life." Zara pulled back to look at his face. "Then we'll fight it together." Kale smiled sadly. "You do not understand the power of what flows beneath us. It offers everything, Zara. Immortality, unlimited knowledge, power beyond imagination. It is almost impossible to resist. Almost." "Love," Kale whispered, kissing her forehead gently. "Love is the only force I have ever seen that can stand against the current's call. But even that may not be enough." As if summoned by his words, a deep thrumming sound began to resonate through the floors beneath their feet. The Crimson Current was calling, and Zara could feel its pull even through the crystalline barriers. It promised her everything she had ever wanted. Everything except the man in her arms. The rescue beacon activated at dawn on Zara's 7th day on Zarian. The sharp electronic pulse cut through the crystalline morning air, and she knew that her time in this strange paradise was coming to an end. Captain Marcus Stone and his crew had finally tracked her emergency signal. Kale stood beside her as they watched the sleek Earth Defense Force vessel descend through Zarian's atmosphere. His face was a mask of resignation, but Zara could see the pain in his violet eyes. "They will want to take you home," he said quietly. "I know." Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Over the past week, she had fallen deeply in love with this gentle, mysterious being. The thought of leaving him behind felt like tearing out her own heart. The rescue ship landed in a shower of displaced crystal sand, and Captain Stone emerged in full environmental gear. He was a good officer and a decent man. But Zara could see his military training taking over as he assessed the alien landscape and the silver-skinned being standing beside her. "Captain Phoenix," Stone said through his suit's comm system, "thank God you're alive." when we received your distress signal. Are you injured? Has this creature harmed you in any way? His name is Kale, Zara said firmly, stepping closer to the Vorthani. And he saved my life. Stone's expression softened slightly behind his helmet visor. I'm sorry. The xenobiology reports we have on file for this system suggested potentially hostile life forms. I'm Captain Marcus Stone, Earth Defense Force. Kale inclined his head politely. Welcome to Zarian, Captain Stone. I am honored by your arrival, though I confess I will be saddened by your departure. The formal politeness of the exchange couldn't mask the tension crackling in the air. Stone's team was already setting up a perimeter. Their weapons ready despite the apparent friendliness of the situation. Will need to depart. Within the hour, Stone told Zara, there's some kind of energy interference from this planet that's playing havoc. With our navigation systems, the longer we stay, the more difficult it will be to achieve orbit. Zara felt her world crumbling. 1 hour. After everything they had shared, everything they had discovered together, she had 1 hour left with Kale. I need a moment. Alone with Captain Phoenix, Stone said to Kale. To debrief her on the crash and assess her physical condition, Kale nodded and withdrew to a respectful distance. But not so far that he couldn't keep Zara in sight. She could feel his protective instincts radiating from him even across the space between them. Zara, Stone said. Switching to a private channel. I've known you for 5 years. I can see something's changed about you. What happened here? She looked at her old friend and colleague, trying to find the words. I fell in love, Marcus. Stone's eyebrows rose. With the alien? Zara, you've been here a week. That's not love, that's Stockholm Syndrome or some kind of pheromone response. It's love, she said firmly. And his people are dying, Marcus. There might be something we can do to help them. That's not our mission. Our mission is to get you home safely. Stone's voice gentled. I know this is hard, but you can't stay here. Even if your feelings are genuine, you're human. You belong with your own kind. Before Zara could respond, she felt it again. The deep, thrumming pull that had been growing stronger each day. The crimson current was calling to her, and this time the sensation was almost overwhelming. She gasped and stumbled slightly, one hand pressed to her chest. Kale was at her side instantly, his arms around her. The current, he said urgently. It grows stronger. You must leave now, before it becomes impossible to resist. What current? Stone demanded, his hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. What's he talking about? Zara straightened in Kale's arms, drawing strength from his touch. There's something beneath this planet. A source of energy that his people have become dependent on. It's killing them. But it also grants incredible power to those who embrace it. She turned to look at Stone, and he stepped back at the intensity in her eyes. It's calling to me, Marcus. Every moment I stay here, the call gets stronger. It promises immortality, unlimited knowledge, power beyond anything we've ever dreamed of. Then we leave now, Stone said decisively. Before whatever this thing is can affect you further. No. The word came out with such finality that both men stared at her. I'm not leaving. Not while Kale's people are dying and there might be something I can do to help. Zara. Please, Kale said, his voice breaking. You do not understand what you are saying. The current does not simply grant power. It transforms those who drink from it. You would no longer be human. Maybe being human isn't enough anymore, she replied, cupping his face in her hands. Maybe it's time for evolution. Stone activated his suit's emergency protocols. I'm sorry, Zara, but I can't let you make this decision while you're clearly under alien influence. Team Alpha, prepare to escort Captain Phoenix to the ship. No, Kale said, and suddenly the air around them shimmered with energy. The rescue team's weapons sparked and died, their electronics fritzing out. She chooses for herself. Stone drew his backup sidearm, a simple projectile weapon, unaffected by the energy pulse. Step away from her, alien. The standoff stretched taut between them. Zara could feel the crimson current pulsing beneath her feet, calling to her with promises of power enough to protect everyone she cared about. She could save Kale's people, convince Marcus to stand down. prevent a conflict between their species. All she had to do was drink from the source. "There's another way," she said suddenly, an idea forming in her mind. "Kale, your people have been using the current for generations, but they've never shared it with an outsider, have they?" "The elders would never permit it," Kale replied, though she could see understanding dawning in his eyes. "But what if an outsider's biology could stabilize the process? What if human physiology could handle the transformation differently?" Stone lowered his weapon slightly. "Zara, what are you talking about?" She turned to face him, her decision crystallizing. "I'm talking about becoming something new, Marcus. Something that can bridge the gap between our species." Before anyone could stop her, Zara broke free from Kale's arms and ran toward the sealed doorway that led to the deep chambers. She could hear both men shouting behind her, their footsteps pounding on the crystal floor. But the current was calling to her now with irresistible force. The doorway dissolved at her approach. Recognizing her intent, beyond lay a spiral staircase that descended into the heart of Zarian, following the flow of the crimson current. Ancient carvings lined the walls, telling the story of the Vorthanes' rise and fall. At the bottom of the stair lay a vast cavern lit by the glow of the current itself. It flowed like liquid fire through channels carved in the living rock, beautiful and terrible in its alien majesty. Scattered throughout the cavern were the remaining Vorthani, perhaps 24 beings in various stages of decline. In the center of it all stood a crystalline altar, holding a single cup made of the same translucent material as Kale's home. The cup was filled with the pure essence of the crimson current. Undiluted and potent beyond measure, Elder Nyx rose from where they had been tending to a dying child, their eyes wide with shock. "Human, you dare profane this sacred place." "I dare to try to save your people," Zara replied, walking steadily toward the altar. Behind her, she could hear Kale and Marcus racing down the stairs. "The current will destroy you," Elder Nyx warned. "Your primitive biology cannot withstand the transformation." "Maybe," Zara said, reaching for the cup, "but maybe that's exactly what it needs. Fresh DNA, a new perspective, a different way of processing the change." She lifted the cup, feeling the liquid within pulse with otherworldly power. It was warm to the touch and seemed to whisper directly to her mind in languages she didn't recognize but somehow understood. Kale burst into the cavern just as she raised the cup to her lips. "Zara, no. If you drink that, you will never be the same again." She looked at him across the cavern, this beautiful, gentle being who had shown her wonders beyond imagination. In his eyes, she saw love and terror and desperate hope all warring together. "I know," she said simply, and drank the crimson current in 3 swift swallows. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Fire raced through her veins, rewriting her genetic code with each heartbeat. Her vision exploded into new spectrums of light. Her hearing expanded to catch frequencies that had never existed for human ears. Most incredibly, her mind suddenly touched the vast network of consciousness that flowed through the current. Connecting her to every Vorthani who had ever lived, she felt Kale's presence in that network, bright and warm and utterly devoted to her. Through their shared connection, she felt his love wrap around her like armor against the pain of transformation, as her body remade itself from the inside out. Zara held on to that love like an anchor. She would not lose herself in this alien consciousness. She would remain Zara Phoenix, human explorer and bridge between worlds. When the transformation finally stabilized, she opened her eyes to find Kale kneeling beside her on the cavern floor. Her vision was sharper than ever before. She could see the silver tracery of energy that flowed beneath his skin. "Are you still you?" he asked softly, afraid to hope. Zara smiled and took his hand, marveling at how she could now feel the pulse of his life force through his skin. "I'm still me," she said, "but I'm also more." Around them, the dying Vorthani were beginning to stir. The presence of hybrid human Vorthani consciousness in their network was stabilizing the current, allowing it to heal rather than consume. Elder Nyx approached cautiously. "Impossible. The prophecies spoke of this, but we thought them mere folklore." "What prophecies?" Marcus Stone asked. He had followed them into the cavern and was now staring in amazement at Zara's transformation. The joining of sky and stone, Elder Nix replied, their voice filled with awe. The union of two peoples that would heal the ancient wound. Zara stood, feeling strength flowing through her transformed body. She was still recognizably human, but her skin now held a faint luminescence. Her eyes swirled with the same violet energy that flowed through the current. I can feel them all, she said wonderingly. Every Vorthani consciousness in the network, and they can feel me. She turned to Kale, her heart overflowing with love and possibility. We did it. We're saving them. Kale pulled her into his arms, and their kiss sent ripples of healing energy throughout the cavern. The crimson current pulsed with renewed vitality, no longer consuming its people, but nurturing them. So what happens now? Stone asked. Oh, he was smiling despite himself at the obvious love between his friend and the alien. Zara looked around the cavern at the Vorthani, who were already growing stronger, at the man she loved more than life itself, and at the friend who had come so far to bring her home. Now, she said, we build something new. Part 4. The transformation begins. 6 weeks had passed since Zara's transformation, and Zarian hummed with new life. The crimson current, stabilized by her hybrid presence in the network, now flowed with healing energy rather than consuming hunger. The Vorthani children, who had been dying, were the first to show improvement. Their translucent skin gaining strength, and their violet eyes brightening with renewed vitality. Zara stood in what had once been the abandoned upper levels of the Vorthane city, now bustling with activity as both species worked together to rebuild. Her transformation had been more complete than anyone anticipated. She retained her human appearance and personality, but her enhanced abilities grew stronger each day. She could now communicate telepathically with any Vorthani in the network, sense the flow of energy through living beings, and manipulate the crystalline structures that formed Zirian's architecture with mere thought. Most remarkably, her presence seemed to accelerate healing in others. Both Vorthani and human, Captain Stone had remained with his team, ostensibly to study this unprecedented first contact situation, but Zara suspected he was genuinely fascinated by the collaborative society they were building. His crew had proven invaluable in establishing communication protocols and helping design hybrid technologies that combined Earth engineering with Forsani energy manipulation. The new fusion generators are exceeding all projections, Stone reported as he joined Zara on the crystalline balcony overlooking the reconstruction efforts. Your people's energy channeling techniques combined with our mechanical engineering has created something neither species could have achieved alone. That seems to be the theme, Zara replied, watching as human engineers worked alongside Vorthani artisans to construct buildings that were both functional and beautiful. Two halves creating something greater than the sum of their parts. She touched her abdomen unconsciously, a habit she had developed over the past week. Stone noticed the gesture and raised an eyebrow. Is there something you need to tell me? He asked gently. Zara's enhanced hearing caught the sound of familiar footsteps ascending the spiral staircase behind them. Kale's energy signature was as distinctive to her now as his voice, and she could feel his emotional state through their connection. He was excited about something, practically vibrating with anticipation. Actually, there is, she said. Turning to face her beloved as he emerged onto the balcony, Kale's silver skin was more lustrous than ever, his health restored by the stabilized current. He had grown even more handsome in the weeks since her transformation, if such a thing were possible. But it was the joy radiating from him that made Zara's heart skip. The medical scans are complete, he announced, moving to her side and taking her hands. Dr. Winters and Elder Nix both confirm what we suspected. Stone looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. You're pregnant. Zara nodded, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. With the first human Vorthani hybrid child. The transformation didn't just save your people, Kale. It created something entirely new. Kale lifted her off her feet and spun her around, his laughter echoing across the crystal spires. When he set her down, he knelt and placed his hands gently on her still flat stomach. Our child will be the bridge between worlds, he said softly. Born of love, carried in hope. and destined to help unite our peoples permanently. The genetic compatibility should have been impossible, Stone mused. But then, nothing about this situation follows normal rules. Love makes its own rules, Zara said, pulling Kale to his feet and into her arms. Their kiss sent ripples of pure joy through the current, and every Vorthani in the network felt the echo of their happiness. Dr. Sarah Winters, Stone's chief medical officer, chose that moment to arrive with a tablet full of data. She was a practical woman in her 50s who had adapted to the wonders of Zarian with remarkable composure. The preliminary genetic analysis is fascinating, she announced without preamble. The child will inherit enhanced abilities from both parents. But the combination appears to be creating something unprecedented. Accelerated healing, expanded sensory perception, natural telepathic abilities, and what appears to be an innate connection to both the Crimson Current and human technology. A natural translator between our species, Elder Nix observed as they approached the group. The Elder's health had improved dramatically since the current stabilization, and they had become one of Zara's strongest supporters. The ancient prophecies spoke of such a child. There are more prophecies? Stone asked with amusement. He had learned to take Vorthani mysticism with a grain of salt, though their predictions had proven remarkably accurate so far. Oh, yes. Elder Nix replied with what might have been a smile. The texts speak of the bridge child, who will open the way to the stars for both peoples. They will be born under the conjunction of 3 moons and bear the marks of both heritages. Zara felt a flutter. In her enhanced awareness, and looked up at Zarian's sky, the planet's 3 moons were indeed approaching a rare alignment that occurred only once every few hundred years. When? She asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Dr. Winters consulted her tablet. Based on the current rate of development, approximately 7 months. Right around the time of the triple moon conjunction, Kale's arms tightened around Zara protectively. The timing cannot be coincidence. In my experience, very little on Zarian is coincidental, Stone observed. This planet seems to operate on its own mysterious schedule, as if summoned by his words. A new presence entered Zara's enhanced awareness. Something was approaching Zarian from deep space, still distant but detectable by her transformed senses. The signature felt familiar yet alien, powerful yet somehow wounded. We're about to have company, she announced, her voice taking on the harmonic overtones that came with accessing the currents. Network Stone activated his unit immediately. All units, this is Stone. Prepare for potential incoming vessels. Unknown contact approaching system. Not unknown, Zara said, consciousness expanding to touch the approaching presence. Vorsani. Survivors from other worlds, Elder Nix gasped. Impossible. We were the last. Not the last, Zara corrected, her hybrid awareness sorting through the complex emotions of the approaching ships. The dispersed, other colonies that fled when their worlds fell to the hunger, they felt the change in the current when I transformed. And now they're coming home. Through her connection to the network, she could sense dozens of Vorthani consciousness scattered across multiple ships. They were weak, desperate, their own crimson current reserves nearly exhausted. But they carried something precious with them, the preserved genetic legacy of their species, protected in crystalline matrices that had kept their people's diversity alive through centuries of exile. How many? Kale asked, his own abilities reaching out to supplement hers. 12 ships, Zara replied. Perhaps 300 individuals total. And Kale, ... She turned to him, her eyes wide with wonder. One of them is carrying your sister. Kale staggered as if physically struck. Liella, but she died when Zarian 3 fell to the hunger. I felt her life force fade in the network. She survived, Zara said with certainty. Barely, but she survived. And now she's coming home to meet her new sister-in-law. The next several hours passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The approaching Vorthani fleet was indeed in desperate condition. Their ships' crystalline hulls cracked and dimmed by long years of exile.